Okay, so sisters, good morning again.
Good morning.
And truly, this is the day the Lord has made. And I've already told you I am absolutely delighted to be with you. And you know that Sister Christina is also very delighted to be here. And you know when I say delighted to be here with all of you, those of you who know me well know what I mean by that. Because I include all of our women in our heavenly community of saints. Because I believe that they are present with us today. Frankly, I believe they're very present to me every day of my life. But during this sacred time, here in Pachmarhi, in this room, these women are very, very present to you. They're very present to me. I know many of them, some of them I don't know, but I know that they are present here. Your foundresses, and I often think of the foundress, Mother Jean Boisset, because she was Superior General and said, going to India. And I tease the General Council and say, as Superior General, maybe I should go someplace. They say, no resigning, no doing what she did. But she's very present as a Superior General in this room. And also, there are many, many sisters who have ministered all over the country. You have many, many women who have gone before you. And they were educators, they were nurses, they were also the sisters who cooked in your kitchens, who did your laundry, who did the housekeeping. So we have many sisters with education who were out there in mission and ministry. And it would be negligent on my part to omit those in the communion of saints who were in internal service, including your women in leadership, your women in formation, your women in vocation ministry, the women who were in what we call internal service. They are all part of that heavenly communion of saints. Also, we have the many sisters whose ministry in life was to take care of the chapel, to be the sacristan. I know in the United States province, when I entered, there was one sister, and that was her mission, and that was her ministry. And she did a really, really good job of taking care of the chapel and taking care of the young sisters who were responsible to help her take care of the chapel. So our room is full. It's absolutely full of these women who are very present. So during our time together, take a few minutes every once in a while to acknowledge their presence, to ask them for guidance, because that's what they're for. Our Constitution says we are in mission and ministry our whole lives. Right now, their mission and ministry is to intercede for us. I pray to Sister Marie-Pierre Rouge as a former Superior General. I pray to Sister Lorraine as a former Superior General. I knew both of them. And sometimes I say, hello, I need your help. What would you do? Okay? And that's their job. That's their mission and ministry. So your prayer, by the way, for the provincial chapter says it well as you express your gratitude to God. Quote, we are grateful to you for our charism, gifted to us through our founder, and kept alive through the dedicated lives of our sisters who have gone before us. So sisters, the room is full, and in your provincial chapter prayer, you have acknowledged that. Your prayer also mentions that this is the 20th provincial chapter. I wonder what some of those women in our heavenly communion of saints would think about this chapter. I wonder what they would think about it. So, in addition, this chapter is being held as we celebrate the 375th anniversary of our foundation as Sisters of St. Joseph. So, we're doubly blessed. A 20th provincial chapter. How many provinces can say that? And how many provinces had a chapter this year celebrating the 375th? So you are doubly blessed, sisters. And each chapter is a time of blessing for a province. Each time you have a chapter. Yes, as Sister Morris said this morning, it's a time for business, reflection, discussion, discernment, elections. But more importantly, and this is more important than the business and the elections and so forth, it's a time when you gather representing many other women in your province. And you also bring with you, by the way, the mission and ministries you are involved with, the lay collaborators, associates. You are representing the hearts of many, many people who cannot be present here. So there's a huge responsibility you have brought with you. So it's a time to speak honestly and openly about our life in common, to share common hopes and dreams with our eyes focused on the future. But it's also a time to laugh, to remember, and for you to have tea breaks. When I was in Nirmala last year, I learned that tea breaks are sacred. They're not just a break, it's a sacred break. And I learned not to go over the break time, or just go over break time by a few minutes. One time we were so rushed that Sister Anila, who was Provincial at the time, had the kitchen staff bring tea up to the meeting room so that we wouldn't miss our tea. So I know tea breaks are very, very important. Now our Constitution is very clear on the responsibilities and the role of a provincial chapter. From page 32, the provincial chapter, which is lived out in union with the entire congregation, fosters the spiritual and apostolic life of the province. Sisters, no provincial chapter is held in secret. You may know that the other day, Sister Moore sent out a message in the WhatsApp for the PRMs. Those are our provinces, regions, and divisions. So every single leader in our congregation knows we are having this chapter. They know the dates and so forth. They have shared that message with their members. So there are hundreds and hundreds of sisters, collaborators, associates, who are praying with you and for you during this sacred time of chapter. Now, there are only 5 functions to a provincial chapter, but for me, the most important one is found on page 33. You study important affairs. You propose structures which will foster participation. Important affairs, structures, and participation. Now, there's lots of things, issues you might like to talk about. But a chapter is reserved for those issues that are important affairs of the province. It's not business of a local community. It's what is the business of the province. And so we have to make sure that we have the wider lens we are looking through for this. And all of this is to bring to life your mission and vision statements, which, my dear sisters, are very, very challenging. I don't know how much you've prayed about them or looked at them recently, but when I have reviewed those, you have set the stage for yourselves with a very big challenge. Very big challenge. So, and because this is what you said you wanted to do. Yes, you are going to vote on those, and they're wonderful, but it's a big, big challenge for you as you move into your future. So we have just experienced 2 days of profound input and sharing. Yes, they were very tiring. It was my 3rd time listening to Father. However, as I shared with him, each time I listened to him, first in Nirmala, then in Nagpur, and now here in Pachmarhi, I learned something new. Or, as I heard him repeat something I already knew, there was another insight that I had. So, I hope that you will take time to reflect on any notes that you took and turn some of the things he shared with you over in your hearts. I know it was a lot of work, and I know learning how to share conversations in the Spirit is not easy. It's not easy to sit around a table and just like that say, oh, this is how I feel. And then what do you do with how I feel? That's hard work, sisters. And to do it all in 2 days, you are to be congratulated. It's a lot of work. And coming to those commitment statements was a lot of work. we all could have used another day or two to unpack everything with a little more time for questions for Father. Can you help us understand a little better what you mean by answering the first question and then the second question? Can you help us when we're giving our reports? Because yesterday, when he challenged you, you had done that work in your group, but you hadn't articulated it to him. So he was missing that piece. If we had had more time, you would have been able to ask those questions. And he also would have been able to mentor you a little bit better. But it's a wonderful beginning. And those 2 days that we spent with him were very, very profound. And the process, while it may have been tiring, was a very good process. He made sure that we had time to ourselves, to reflect and pray. Because you can't just jump into a conversation and share your heart unless you've reflected and prayed about what's in your heart. What is it you want to share? And how do you want to participate in that conversation? So the process is a very good one. You might want to think about how to use that process in your local community. In the general lay community, Sisters Christina, Elisa, Celine, and myself, every once in a while we will have a sharing of the heart, which is very Josephite, very Ignatian. But we just don't sit down and say, tonight let's share our hearts. Okay? We know a couple days ahead of time that that's the prayer we are going to have. So we have personal time to reflect on the state of our heart so that we can share the state of our hearts with one another. We also need sometimes to share the state of the house, what's going on in our community. And we need to do that in our general lay community when I go back. Okay? We need to assess our lives together. How are we living together as community? Okay? Are we praying like we want to? Are we recreating together like we want to? Are we being intercultural? No, we're trying. Remember, there's 4 cultures in the general lay community. An American, me, an Italian, you all know that, that's Christina, a Brazilian, Elisa, and an Indian, Sister Celine, coming from very different life experiences. And you all know that as the eldest, I'm old enough to be Christina's mother and Elisa's mother. So I have 2 daughters, and then I have a younger sister in Celine. She fits in the middle. She's their aunt, more or less. I also, what? Excuse me, she's the auntie. And I bring more experiences with me because of that age difference. So when we come together, we're working on being intercultural. We're not there yet. We're not there yet at all. We're very multicultural, but we continue working on that. We also know, as Sister Morris referenced in her address this morning, that we're together for mission. We're together for mission. We're not together so that we can visit all the provinces, regions, and missions. We're together for mission. Visiting is part of the mission. Okay, but also part of our mission is how we live together. Okay, so that's something you might want to take back to your local communities. A state of the heart, conversations in the spirit, and state of the house. How are we living together? So Father Rodriguez, as I said, he gave you input on spiritual conversations, community life and collaboration, being intercultural, spirit-filled pilgrims of hope, and being women of discernment and interiority. You shared deeply in your spiritual conversations. As someone who only listened to the reports, I could hear the difference between the first day, the first morning, the afternoon, the second morning, and the second afternoon. By the second morning and the second afternoon, you were very much in tune with your feelings. The first day, everybody was blah, blah, blah. The second day, there was a distinct difference when you shared your feelings. Yes, some said they were disappointed. Others used a couple new words, though. So I began to hear a more profound explanation, more profound sharing that you were able to enter into. And you are to be congratulated for that. because that's not easy to name a feeling and then to speak the feeling. I might know when I'm really happy, but do I want to say, I'm happy today? Or do I want to think of another way to express that? Okay, I heard a difference. I also saw a difference as you articulated and wrote your commitment statements. Okay, and that was hard work. So congratulations again to the secretaries who tried to resign, weren't allowed. Having been a secretary in small groups, I know that feeling. You just want to say it's someone else's turn. But you did a really, really good ministry. It wasn't just a job. That was a ministry you had. A ministry to the group and a ministry to the whole plenary. And that was not an easy ministry. But you are to be congratulated for that. And of course, Prasanna, who took all the notes and kept everything intact, is also to be congratulated for that piece of the ministry, without which it wouldn't have happened. It's a wonderful image and model for collaboration. It's a great, great beginning for your provincial chapter, a great beginning. So this morning, I'd like to add a little something on our call as vowed women religious, living consecrated religious life. Okay, so we are vowed women religious, and we live consecrated religious life. We are active religious. Okay, so first of all, we are called. We're called just as Jesus Christ called his first disciples. It's a call freely given and freely responded. And nobody stood over me and beat me and said, say yes to Jesus or else. It was a free response in my heart and in my soul and in my mind. And your response was also given freely, no matter how old or how young you were. You responded freely to that call. So I invite you to take just a minute, close your eyes, and think back to your call. Yes, you and I were called by Jesus, but how were you called? Unlike the first disciples, the human person of Jesus did not call you. If he did, I would see a halo over your head, because that would have been a very profound vision you had. You were called, but how were you called? Was it a sister? Was it a sister of St. Joseph? Was a priest the instrument that Jesus used to call you? Was it a teacher? Was it a friend? Was it a quiet moment on retreat? Or a quiet moment in nature? Was it something that someone said? Or a passage from the Bible that you were reading? And how did you respond? Okay, open your eyes. Each one of you in this room received the call in a very particular way. Some of you might say, well, it was a sister of St. Joseph, and somebody else might say, yeah, me too. And somebody else might say, yeah, me too. But the way your heart and head and soul heard that call is very different. And how you responded was different. Okay? Your vocation call is yours, and it's unique to you. And once in a while, if you've never shared your vocation call, that's a good exercise to share in community. Not a big, long life story, but what's your simple call? And it could have been a call that was repeated many times. Because sometimes we don't respond the first time. When we do respond, we say, no, go away, not me. And then God, Jesus comes back another time. And maybe a second time you say, go away, not me. So some of us have a call that needed to be repeated a couple times before we said yes. And that's because it was your call. God calls all of us differently. God knows when it's our time. Okay? I entered the community when I was 17. I had finished my high school education. Christina entered a little later than that. God called each of us at a very different time and in a very different way. But each of us was called. So sometimes it's not just fun, but sometimes it's interesting and it says something about who we are when we understand how each of us was called. We're called at different times in our lives. We're called at different ages, in different places. And only God knows when that right time is. And as I said, no two people hear the call in the exact same way. We are all chosen. All of us are chosen. But we're chosen by God. And God knows how we need to be called. So it's very, very particular. And frankly, I feel kind of special when I think about my call, because it was mine. And in my, you call them batches, we call them bands in the United States. There were 12 of us. Each of us was called very differently. I entered with another girl, because we were very young, who came from my same parish. Her call was very different from mine. First of all, she went to a high school, and the Sisters of Mercy were her teachers. Imagine. She didn't enter the Sisters of Mercy. She entered the Sisters of St. Joseph. Our calls were very, very different. For whatever reason, she chose not to enter the Sisters of Mercy. She entered the Sisters of St. Joseph. But our calls were very, very different. Now, our call is to apostolic vow religious life. We publicly profess our vows. We profess poverty, chastity, and obedience. We profess publicly. We don't make a secret vow. Okay, these are public vows. And like our free response to our call, our vows are made freely. No one stands in back of us, beating us, saying it's time to say yes to poverty, beep, beep, beep. No, we respond freely. We respond freely. And it's important for us to remember that we said yes freely. Because later, as we move through our lives, sometimes those vows are tested. And we have to say, yeah, I said yes. I said yes freely. And what does that mean? It means different things at different times in your life. And we can all share what it meant and how it meant, what it felt like to be poor at some times. And what does poor mean? It doesn't mean not having money in your pocket. Poor means maybe I'm assigned to a place that's far from my family. Maybe poor means I am living on the peripheries with poor people. Obedience is one of the hardest vows. Maybe at some points in your life, no. But there are times when the vow of obedience is particularly difficult. I will share a personal example. I was very happy. I was teaching. I had been living in a community with 4 sisters, 5 sisters at one point, 2. One in particular was a very, very good friend of mine. And the Provincial came for her visitation, and I sat in the parlor with her, and she said to me, Dolores, we're going to be moving you. I said, I don't want to move. I was very young, and believe it or not, I was bold. I was very bold. So I said, do you have any other possibilities for me? And she said, oh, sure. And I thought, well, this is good. She has possibilities for me. So she said, well, instead of the academy, you could go to Stanford. And I thought, that's where the academy is. So she mentioned the city. So I said, well, do you have one more choice? She said, sure. I thought, God, be good to me. This has to be it. She said, you could go to Sacred Heart Academy on Strawberry Hill. Sister very cleverly gave me 3 choices, only they were all the same place. She just used different names. So, I said to her, I laughed and I said, well, who's going to be the principal? Because there was going to be a new principal. And she said, I cannot share that with you because it's not confirmed yet. So with great faith, I said yes. It was my vow of obedience. I would have loved to have stayed where I was. I was teaching 7th and 8th grade, so boys and girls who were crazy. I was very young. For me, it was a perfect fit. It was heaven. And yet when I went to Stanford, the academy, Sacred Heart Academy, I was there for 9 years, and it was one of the best experiences of my community living. I lived in 2 different communities, one a very large one, and then one a smaller one on the property. To this day, and that was a long time ago, I am still in touch with some of those students, and I am a very good friend of one of the teachers, and that's 40 years ago. So living the vows isn't always easy, but there's always that reward someplace. There's always that reward someplace. And other times, my vow of obedience was not tested. I was invited, told to go someplace, and I thought, oh, that sounds good. But that particular time was very difficult. But God knew what God was doing, because it was a wonderful experience. Was it happy every day? No, because there were some sisters in that community, I was very young, who had been there for many years and had a certain way of doing things. So yes, there were hard times, but all in all, it was a blessed experience. So turn that over when you're thinking about the vow of obedience. And the same with the vow of chastity. Sometimes at certain ages of your life, it will be harder. And remember, chastity doesn't mean not being attracted to men. Chastity can also mean being loving to everybody. Okay, we take the vow of chastity so that we can be all for all. And sometimes that's really, really hard. And it's different stages of your life. Different stages of your life. You will have difficulty with that. And that's okay. That's okay. So our vows, by the way, are made within the context of our Constitution. Okay, our Constitution. So when we make our vows, we live them out according to this Constitution. We're not Franciscans, we're not Sisters of Mercy, we're not Dominicans. We're Sisters of St. Joseph of Chambéry. And these are the vows, these are the constitutions that we follow. They're very particular, very special, and they're very freeing. I would suggest strongly that you reread your Constitution on a regular basis. It's very helpful. It's been helpful for me. You might see that this says English on the back. That's because in my office I have English, French, Portuguese, Italian, so that when I visit the different provinces, we can all refer to the same page. This time I brought English. Okay, our call as Sisters of St. Joseph of Chambéry, as Sister Maura said, is lived in community. And community can be different things. Community can be a large group, it can be a formation community, it can be a hospital community, it can also be a sister who has been given permission to study, and therefore she might live by herself or in an intercongregational community. For part of my ministerial life, I lived with 2 Franciscans and a Sister of Mercy, because we've all lived in the same area, we had similar ministries, we had none of our own community in this particular city, so we lived together. I had permission to do that. I just didn't say to my provincial, oh, I found 3 sisters I'm gonna live with. I had permission to do that, and that was my community. We prayed together, we recreated together, we took turns cooking. That was our local community. The other sisters were just as committed to living in community as I was. It was just as important for them. Because in community, that's one of our missions. And then we're in community, as Sister Moore said, for mission. And that's very, very clear in our Constitution. We're not in community to like a dormitory or a hostel or a hotel. We're in community for mission. We have the example of Jesus, the first apostles and disciples, of Mary, his mother, and of the other women who followed Jesus. And that was very different in those days for women to follow an itinerant rabbi. It's one thing to have your mother follow you, but these other women, so it was a very different kind of community. And we know from Acts of the Apostles that this was not an easy group. Going back to Jesus and his disciples, think of Peter, the fisherman, his brother Andrew, then there was John, the beloved disciple, Judas, who betrayed him. These were all his people. This was Jesus' community. So think of his ups and downs in that local community. And we should expect nothing less. If this is how Jesus lived, and we consider ourselves disciples of Jesus, that's our life too. That's our life as well. So we should also think every once in a while about our call. Am I faithful to my original call? Have I had other calls within the call? Is my heart still on fire as it was in my early days? Or am I kind of comfortable and lazy and whatever? Do I take my call for granted? Or do I reflect back on that call? And have there been other calls? Certainly in my life, I have had many calls. Okay, yes, called to be a sister of St. Joseph of Chambéry. I wanted to be a teacher, and for 18, 19 years, I was a teacher. And then I was invited to go to Rome to set up our first communication network. And I said to the Provincial at the time, I need to think about this, I need to discern. She said, well, you have about a month. And there was plenty of time. Again, I was very comfortable where I was. So I said yes, I had taken some courses in communication, and I was invited to go to Rome, and I eventually said yes. So that was a call within the call. I was also a member of our provincial council on 2 different occasions. Those were calls within the call. I was provincial, another call. All of my ministries were calls within my original call. And there were many. My most recent call, as you know, was to be the Superior General. And I've shared this with some of you, and I apologize if you've heard this story, but when I went to the General Chapter in 2021, I was working in the hospital, and I said to the boss, the president, he said, what do you think? I said, I'm coming home. He said, okay, imagine my dilemma, his surprise, when I had to send him an email to say, yes, I was coming home, but I wasn't staying. He said, sister. He was a very, very good man, a good man. But when I was at the General Chapter, I was positive, sisters, positive, that I would not be elected, because in our history, there have never been, since the time of the French sisters, 2 sisters from the same province in a row. So I said, just finished 12 years with Sister Sally, I'm going home. And I kept looking around, and the Americans were seated here, and the Brazilians over here, and I said to myself, it's time for a Brazilian. And I was looking around, I had my heart and eye on Sister X and Sister Y, and then I started hearing my name. And I thought, God, what are you doing? You can't have 2 in a row. And well, God had a different idea. Okay, so I'm very fond of the saying, man proposes, but God disposes. We have ideas, but God's the one who's over everything. So that call within the call was a surprise. It was a surprise. But again, it's a surprise that has turned out to be one of my life's greatest blessings. How else would I meet all of you? And how else would I learn to love so many different, diverse people and cultures? How else would I have eaten so many yummy different kinds of foods? I love food and cakes. So it's been a blessing in my life, but it certainly isn't something I ever imagined as a call. And when I finish this role, I will have another call. God knows what that call is, because God, in God's mind, knows the future. I don't know what that call will be when I finish as Superior General, but there will be one more call, at least. I don't know. We'll see what that is. Okay, so the entire first part, getting back to our Constitution, the entire first part is one that should be read and reread, and it's simply entitled, Our Life in the Congregation. It covers the most important aspects of who we are, and I reread it every once in a while to remind me of what I said yes to. Now, as you know, because I've been in the congregation such a long time, when I first entered, it was still the old black, well, it had a black cover, Constitution that was in the process of being revised. Very strict, very thick, very legal. I lived through the time of what we call the Green Constitution, because it had a green cover. And now we have a blue Constitution because it has a blue cover. And I was on the committee that helped to rewrite and put together this new Constitution. It's very freeing, but it's also very serious. So reread it, please. And, oh, I know the other thing I wanted to say before I forget it, is we're on mission always. And that's one of my favorite passages. And that's why I encourage you to talk to and pray to our sisters in the communion of saints. Now, as consecrated women religious, we are called to mission, and we're called to be missionary disciples. And that's to follow and participate in the mission of Jesus. Our provinces, regions, and missions have missions and ministries, but they come from the mission of Jesus. That's what we're all about. We follow Jesus. We don't follow ourselves. We follow Jesus. And we're on mission all our lives. And as consecrated women religious, it's a mission to all people. And if we went around the room and I asked you who you are missioned to, some of you are missioned to children, some of you are missioned to adults, some of you are missioned to parishes, some of you are in the health ministry. So you're ministering in different ways, but you're all ministering in the mission of Jesus. And as I said to you earlier, think about the first community of disciples that Jesus gathered around him. I think that's the first example of a diverse community. Very, very diverse. So these first followers of Jesus follow Jesus. We also must follow Jesus as written in the Word of God. And as Father Rodriguez said, reread, go back to the New Testament. Reread what's said in the Gospels, because that's our Word of God. So we're called today to be like the first communities that follow Jesus, missionary disciples, witnesses to a new way. We follow the New Testament. We are prayerful, and that's been emphasized more than once. And we strive to live in communion, first of all, with one another, our sisters in community, and then with those with whom we minister. You're called to live for these sacred days in this community. You're a chapter community, at least for a few days. So you are called to live mission in this community. And it's also our mission to model community to our world. Because when you think about the world situation today, whether it's your socio-political situation here in India or the world situation, we have something very special to offer. And we should be modeling how it is to live in communion, how it is to live in community. And our people need that today. Our world leaders need to see the Sisters of St. Joseph of Pachmarhi and the family of the Sisters of St. Joseph, how we live, and how we minister. And we need to be open. And as this is something else that Father emphasized, open to the signs of our times. Not yesterday, but what are the signs of today? And what might be the signs for tomorrow? And we also know we're on the synodal journey. It's not my journey. It's our journey. And it's the journey of the congregation. And we have two journeys we're on. Our province, and then the congregation is also on a big journey. So as a congregational body, we also have to move together in synodality. And that's not always easy. We have to be co-responsible and focused on mission. So it's urgent, sisters, that we establish relationships, first with one another, and then with the wider congregational body, if possible. And our hearts have to be open to welcome everybody, not just our friends. It's easy to welcome your friends. It's not so easy to welcome people that may not be our friends or may not share our views, but we're called to welcome everybody. So as I bring my remarks to a close, I want to say a few words to you all about being a chapter delegate, okay? So as we open this particular session, I remind you what you said yes to. In addition to your call, you said yes to be a delegate for this chapter. You said yes. You also said yes to journeying together. Not one of you is here by yourself or for yourself. You are here as a group. You are here for the province. You are not here for yourself. You are not here for your friends. You are here for the province. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's hard, and it's a big responsibility. Think of the sisters that are here. They're relying on you to make the right, discerned decisions. They are relying on you to set the direction that everybody is going to follow. And you said yes to your motto, to your logo for this provincial chapter. Journeying together as pilgrims of hope to be Christ-centered communities as leaven for mission. Christ-centered communities. Why? To be leaven for mission. Right? And again, your logo and your motto is something you want to go back to every once in a while and reflect on. It's not just for this week. Okay, this is something that you need to reflect on and talk about. What does it mean when you go home in your community? Have you had these conversations? Because everybody needs to know what everybody's thinking and feeling about this. So, my dear sisters, you are the ones called to be here now, in this sacred time and in this sacred space. You are the ones called to have open hearts, open minds, and open spirits. You are to be attentive to the whispers of the Spirit in yourselves, and also the whispers of the Spirit in the group. And because the Spirit isn't going to just whisper in your ear, the Spirit is going to hover over the whole group. In this room, in the dining room, in the chapel, the Spirit is with us everywhere. So we have two ways to listen to the Spirit. What's the Spirit saying to us? And what's the Spirit saying sometimes to me? You are the ones called to deep discernment in making decisions and in electing leadership. And I want to step back a minute about electing leadership. That's not for today, and that's not for tomorrow. Please put aside whatever preconceived notions you have about who should be looking around the room, who should be the next one. That's not for today. A very wise person once said to me, Dolores, you have today. You don't have yesterday. It's already gone. And you don't know if you have tomorrow. So you live today. Today is the only day you have. Tomorrow, you will look back at today. But you can't do anything about today because it's already gone. And that's an advice I would offer to each of you. Today is the day. Yesterday's already gone. Yesterday was lovely, but it's gone. And we don't have tomorrow yet. Think about the people who thought they had a tomorrow and didn't. So you make the best of the day you have. So the election is down the road. Okay, so please put that out of your mind for now. There's a lot of business to get through before we get to election. Okay, so you don't want to be preoccupied with that. Remember, that's not the primary purpose of a chapter in the first place. Now, St. Benedict has a famous saying that I love, and he is quoted as saying to his brothers, listen with the ears of your heart. So you listen with the ears of your heart, not just with the ears of your head. Okay, and there's that saying, sometimes things go in this ear and come out the other. Okay, but this is listening with the ears of your heart. Okay? Be a good, deep listener. It's good advice for any time, but it's very wise advice for the time of chapter. So we leave our preconceived notions of what I think should happen at this chapter, because now we need to say, what do we desire to happen at this chapter? Not what I want. What is it now we're moving towards that we want? What do we want from this chapter for the future of our province, for the future of our mission, our collective mission that we're living through Jesus? So let our chapter journey, because it's already begun, continue in hope and celebration of who we are and of who we are called to be. Let us go forth in a spirit of openness and trust in God the Father, Jesus his Son, and the Holy Spirit. We know we are watched over by Mary, our mother, and protected by Joseph, the foster father of Jesus, and the faithful husband of Mary. So sisters, these are the days the Lord has made, and together let us rejoice and be glad. And to all of this we say, Amen. Amen. To all of this we say, Amen. Thank you.